If your official LSAT score came back lower than your practice tests, and it stings more because everyone around you seems to be crushing it, I want you to take a pause, take a deep breath, slow down. What happened to you is real, it has a cause, and the cause is almost never the one keeping you up at night. You didn't get dumber between your last LSAT practice test and test day, you didn't forget how to take the LSAT, and no, LSAC almost certainly did not mess up your LSAT score. Today, I'm going to tell you what actually happened, why it feels so unfair, and what you can do about it if you're retaking the LSAT. But let me kill the first fear right away because everyone jumps to it. LSAC messed up my LSAT score. And I get why you want that to be true. That's the version where it's not your fault. But the LSAT isn't graded by some tired person with a red pen. It's scored by computer, then checked by people whose whole job it is to stare at the scoring data and flag anything strange, anything off, anything suspicious. And if something were off, it'd get caught before scores ever went out. And think about who LSAC is. The Law School Admission Council is one of the slowest, most bureaucratic, most by-the-book organizations on the planet. If they had misscored thousands of students, they wouldn't be able to bury it. They would issue a correction. They'd tell the law schools they'd have to eat all the headlines. You'd see the correction emails and the potential lawsuits. But you don't because there is no mass scoring failure. The real explanation is quieter and way more common and way less exciting. Now, the reason you feel like things are off is because of selection bias. When somebody scores exactly what they expected, they don't post on Reddit about it. Nobody writes a viral thread called, "I scored my practice test average and I'm okay." That post gets 0 upvotes. Even the people who beat their target tend to stay quiet. But if you score 15 points below your practice test average, that feels like a gut punch. So the person goes online and lets it all out. The forums, the Reddit forums, fill with the worst test days, huge score drops, weird test center stories, theories about secret curves, and LSAC out to get everybody. But what you never see are the thousands of people whose scores landed right where they expected. They've got nothing to talk about. They're already filling out their applications. Now, that doesn't mean score drops aren't real. It means you're staring at a small, lopsided pile of the most upset people and treating it like it's everybody. Reddit and the Facebook groups are totally fine for venting, but they are a terrible place to figure out what actually happened to you. So don't measure your one bad day against 100 other people's meltdown posts. Now let's talk about the real reasons. The first is about how the LSAT is built, how it's created, because almost nobody explains this part right. People love to say that LSAC tightened the curve to punish everybody, but that's not really a thing. The LSAT is not curved against the other people in your room. It is equated. In plain English, that means every version gets adjusted, so a 165 means the same thing no matter when you took the LSAT. A 165 and a 165 in June versus September are meant to reflect the same ability. That is the whole point of test equating, the science of standardized tests, and it's the opposite of a conspiracy. Now, near the top of the scale, the room for error is tiny, and it always has been. A 170 is roughly 67 questions out of 75. If you slip from 67 out of 75 right to 64 out of 75 right, you're now at a 168. You could even be several points lower than that because the scale is packed tight up there. Down at a 150, missing 3 more barely moves you, but up at 170, 3 questions is everything. So picture your test. You walk out feeling like it went fine, a couple of odd questions, nothing scary, but you missed 2 in one section, 3 in the next, 1 more, then 1 more after that. In the middle of the scale, that's basically a rounding error. But if you were aiming at the top, that's a 7-point slide. Even if you didn't panic or you didn't choke, you just got a couple questions wrong, but your margin of error was thin. Now, there is a wrinkle here that makes this a bit worse. A couple of years ago, LSAC dropped the logic games section. Now, you might have heard that taking out games made the LSAT easier, and that's why scores went up. Now, LSAC claims removing games didn't make the test easier, but of course, it helped some people hurt other people. So the people who used to do great on games now lost their safest points. Now, the LSAT is now 2 scored logical reasoning sessions instead of 1, And so you've got to focus more on logical reasoning. Some people are wired for that, some people are not. Either way, your old strategy might not work for you anymore. Now, a lot of people train for an easier LSAT than the one they actually end up taking, and they have no idea they're doing it. So you want to be honest about how you actually practiced for the LSAT. Ask yourself, for example, did you do all 4 sections in one sitting every time, including that unscored experimental section? Or did you quietly skip that because it doesn't count? You also want to be honest about the breaks. On test day, you have one 10-minute break and nothing else. You can't pause the clock to check your phone, get a snack, check your email, go to the bathroom, talk to your roommate or significant other. You can't take 4 separate sections on 4 consecutive days, add them up and call it a full practice test. You can't do 100 separate questions on your phone over the course of a week and call it a full practice test either. Endurance matters, stamina matters, pacing matters. All of that is important to simulating the real thing. And so if your practice didn't look like the real thing, your practice tests were inflated. It's an easier version of the LSAT than what LSAT actually gives you on test day. Test day is stricter than your kitchen table because by section 4, you're cooked because you never trained the endurance. You're stressed on test day because that one is for real. If the proctor interrupts you, if the screen freezes, you get stuck, you start rushing. Any one of those things you shake off on a practice test, but if it's on the real official LSAT test, that's a different story, of course. And so make sure, ask yourself honestly, where you're taking your practice tests under real test conditions. If not, you know what you've got to change going forward for if you decide to retake the LSAT. And know that, of course, even a good LSAT score isn't what it used to be. Scores at the top have crept up. The medians have climbed up a couple of points each year for the past couple of years. Yale's median's up. Harvard's median's up. They're both now at 174 for their medians, meaning half their entering class scored higher than that. Now, of course, you should know I sell LSAT prep for a living, so take what I say with a grain of salt, but the data backs it up. You can see it for yourself. Just Google any given law school LSAT 509, LSAT medians. You'll see the data for yourself. Now, if your score was not what you wanted and you're retaking, first, take a couple days off. Be disappointed. It's okay. Vent, screaming to a pillow. Post on Reddit if you want to. Then close up the laptop and get back to work because spiraling is not going to help you. You also want to do an autopsy on your score before anything else. Pull up your practice tests and your score report and look hard at how you prepared. Not did I work hard, but did I train for the real test? Was I doing 4 sections in every single sitting? Was I reviewing every single wrong answer until I could explain it? Or was I just looking at the answer key saying, oh, I get it now, then moving on? You've got to build the skill, not just run more questions. You also want to build your retake prep around what you actually missed and make your practice tests harder than test day. If the actual test is 4 sections timed, maybe you occasionally do 5 scored sections or 5 sections in one sitting so that 4 feels easier by comparison. And for reference, the LSAT actually used to contain 5 sections, 4 scored, 1 extra, and so you're now taking an easier version anyway, so it's not crazy for you to build up your endurance in that way. Look at your practice tests leading up to the official and see what your weak areas are. What do you need to drill? What do you need to build up on the foundation on? Maybe there's a section or question set that you weren't totally clear on. That should orient your prep going forward. Then, between now and your retake, whether you're taking it in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months or more, you've got time to do at least 1 practice test a week, maybe 2 practice tests a week, maybe even 3. I typically recommend max 1 or 2 though, and review in depth. You want to ideally have done at least a dozen full-timed exams before the real thing, so test day feels boring by comparison and you've done it all before. Same start time, same single 10-minute break, no phone, no pausing the clock. And one last thing, since people tend to ask me this, if you're confident that LSAC screwed things up, chances are they didn't, but you can ask LSAC to hand score your test. If your result is so far below your range that it feels impossible, do it for peace of mind if you need to. Just know 2 things going in. The score it returns is final, even if it's lower, and it almost always confirms the original. Hand scoring is more of a leftover from the paper LSAT days. On the online LSAT, there's no stray pencil marks for it to catch. And so whatever your LSAT score is, I want you to know that your LSAT score is not a measure of your self-worth or your intelligence. It says nothing about the kind of lawyer you're going to be. It's just a snapshot of 1 2.5 hour sitting and of how you prepped going in. And if your score blindsided you, nothing is wrong with you. The plan that you used to prep The studying that you did just wasn't built for the LSAT they actually gave you. If your practice average was higher than your real thing, you know that you have the ability there. You just need a different way to get to show up on the day that counts, harder practice under real conditions, and ruthlessly reviewing the questions that gave you trouble. And so if you want help with that review process, help preparing for a retake, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. You can book that free LSAT tutoring lesson with me personally at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. You can grab that free cheat sheet. It's a quick download, a free PDF at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. Again, linked below the video, pinned in the chat, in my bio as well. That's an open offer for everybody watching this now or later. I see a bunch of questions here in the chat. I'll get to as many as I can. Feel free to keep dropping them in. I see Khadijah says, by section 4, I was so exhausted. I hear you on that. I mean, that's what that endurance factor is for, right? You want to take more practice tests, building up your endurance, building up your stamina so that you're not losing speed or accuracy on section 4 just because it is section 4. So my remedy for this is take more practice tests in full sittings, 4 sections, 2.5 hours with standard timing, more if you have accommodations for extra time. I see Smoke Seams asking, are you able to skip the 10-minute break on test day? I have 53 time accommodations, so 53-minute accommodations, and the break messes with my flow. That's a great question. I have not heard about the option to skip the 10-minute break. My understanding is that it's required by default for almost everybody, and some folks with accommodations will get more breaks, including unlimited stop-start breaks, but I don't know that you can skip the break altogether. Keep in mind that if you have time and a half or double time, that makes for a longer sitting, and so be careful what you wish for. Having no breaks sounds like it'd make things harder for the typical applicant, I would think. I mean, because think about it this way. If you've got standard timing, then 4 35-minute sections, including that 10-minute break, becomes about 2.5 hours. If you have time and a half, multiply everything by 50% more, that becomes roughly 4 hours. If you have double time, that becomes about 5 hours. And so 5 hours or 4 hours with no break sounds pretty grueling. I get if it messes with your flow. I have not heard about LSAC removing the break for anybody, but I suppose it wouldn't hurt to ask about it. But I would first take a practice test under those conditions just to make sure that you actually want that, because you want to be careful what you wish for. And for the folks who get extra time accommodations, again, it can help with the pacing, but then the endurance factor becomes a bit more of a struggle because test day is, of course, a lot longer. So just keep that in mind. Always practice what you want before you actually ask for it. Practice those conditions. Scanning through for any questions I may have missed here. I see Tom is asking, I got a 172. How can I improve? Well, first off, congrats on the 172. That's a great outcome. I know that a lot of folks would be very happy to have that outcome, but if you want to push for more, I'm not going to try and stop you. Keeping in mind that the LSAT medians of the top 14 law schools range 170 to 174. And so it's not crazy to push higher if you want Harvard, Yale, or any of the T14, especially if your GPA is on the lower side. It's worth shooting for more. Now, when you're in the high 160s, low 170s or more, and you're struggling or you want to push higher, the issue is not necessarily a particular question type. It's usually you're getting hard questions wrong simply because they're hard. And so in that case, you want to focus more on just drilling tough questions and reviewing your mistakes there. It could be a particular less common method of reasoning, a particular answer choice trap or pattern that they tend to throw at you, but it's not like you're struggling with strengthening questions just because you don't know how to strengthen something, for example. And so one thing you might try is just doing the back half, the second half, the harder half of any given logical reasoning section, because that's where the harder questions tend to show up. For those who aren't aware, LSAC presents logical reasoning questions in a general order of difficulty. Not a perfect order, but a general order, meaning they get tougher as the section progresses. And so what that means is the first 10 questions tend to be easier. You want to blast through those first 10, try to solve the first 10 questions in roughly 10 minutes. building up a time bank that you can then apply to the tougher questions later in the section. So if you know that you get only hard questions wrong, then just doing only hard questions could help you. But of course, the review method is where you want to focus. At LSAT Unplugged, we use a framework called the Socratic review method. It's the cornerstone of my courses, my coaching programs. The idea being that we're not going to be there on test day, and we can't take it for you, certainly. So we've got to give you the confidence, the clarity, and the skill to perform when it truly matters. And so we ask you a series of guiding questions live in the coaching. And you can also apply that same process to your own self-studying. For example, was it your approach to the question that was off, or was it the text of the question that threw you off? Was it a tempting wrong answer choice or an unappealing right answer choice? Because if we can get down to the root cause of what you're getting wrong and why you're getting it wrong, then we can help you avoid making that same mistake again. And so you want to keep some kind of mistake log or an error journal logging your mistakes, looking for patterns in what you're getting wrong and why, so that you can course correct in those particular weak areas and avoid making those same mistakes again. And if you want to talk through what that review process could look like, or what your study plan could look like if you are shooting for a retake, then you can, of course, book that free LSAT tutoring with me. That's an open offer for anybody watching this now or later, by the way. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. It's below the video, pinned in the chat, in my bio as well. I see Fire Lords asking, is a 168 getting me into Michigan? Well, it depends on what your GPA is, because it's the killer combination of both your LSAT score and your undergraduate GPA that is largely going to determine your chances. Michigan's GPA median is around a 3.9, and so if you're below the GPA median, you want to be higher above the LSAT median in order to compensate. And I'm pretty sure their median is at least a 170, so just keep that in mind. Look up the particulars, but okay, if you're at a 3.7 on the GPA, then you want to be ideally 172, 174 or above to compensate for having a sub-median GPA. Walter says, I've got a 3.6 GPA and a 143 LSAT. Okay, so 143 LSAT, to be frank, is probably not going to get you into a law school worth attending. There are a couple of super low-ranked law schools that would technically take you with a 143 LSAT, but they're certainly not giving you scholarship money, and their employment outcomes and bar passage rates are not good, certainly not worth paying for in either time or money. And so my strong recommendation would be to retake the LSAT. If you can get up 20 points or more, you're going to get radically different and better admissions outcomes, get into better schools, get more scholarship money worth shooting for that retake. Mrs. Platinum says, good morning. My score is on a temporary hold. I'm a first-time test taker, by the way. Sorry to hear about the temporary hold. Unfortunately, more and more folks are getting score holds. For those who aren't aware, there have been some reported incidents of cheating on the LSAT, and so LSAC has leveled up their security, and they tend to look at anything that might constitute a red flag. You will get your score back eventually, I hope, but sit tight. And by the way, folks, for those of you who did not get your scores back this morning, in some cases, it might be because of not having completed the writing sample or a security check on the writing sample. And so double check whether you did the writing sample or not. Do it ASAP so you can get your score back soon. And by the way, in line with the cheating on the LSAT, LSAC is returning to in-person testing for nearly everybody, starting with the August LSAT. For those who aren't aware, for the past couple of years, the LSAT's been offered either remotely from home or in person at a testing center. But due to the cheating, the LSAT's going back to in person for nearly everybody starting in August, with rare exceptions. Because what LSAC found is that while very few people, relatively fewer people took the LSAT remotely, they constituted the majority of score holds. Only 40% took it remotely, but they were the majority of score holds. So for that reason, it was basically an issue where it was leading to things getting backed up, leading to unnecessary delays in folks getting their scores. And you certainly don't want to delay when you're waiting on your LSAT score for your application to be complete. And so hopefully things will go more smoothly going forward, but know that if you are retaking in August or beyond, you've got to prepare for the in-person LSAT. One other new change with the LSAT starting in August is that they've changed the order in which you get to schedule your LSAT to be based on the order in which you register for the LSAT. So in other words, you register for the LSAT, you can even register for it now, and the order in which you register for it on LSAC's website, which you can do today, by the way, that will then determine the order in which you get to schedule your particular LSAT day and time and location closer to that month's LSAT administration. With the LSAT being in person, the best test centers, the most convenient test centers get booked up first. The most convenient days and times also get booked up first. And so I would strongly recommend, if you know you're retaking the LSAT in August or September, especially, but also October, November, and beyond, I would strongly recommend that you register for that LSAT administration now. The August LSAT is about 6 weeks away. The September LSAT's about 2.5 months away. So think about whether you want to do August or September, ideally, if not beyond. All else being equal, it's better to take the LSAT and apply earlier rather than later. And so if you feel like you could be ready by August, I would recommend taking it in August if you feel like 6 weeks will be enough time. But if you think you need more time, I would then go for September, gives you another full month, gives you 2.5 months in total, and you can still apply to law school the month that application's open. And it is better to apply a little bit later with a higher LSAT score than earlier with a lower LSAT score. So give yourself the additional month if you need it. I see M's asking why they changed the LSAT interface. So I'm glad you brought that up. So another change starting in August, for those who are not aware, is that LSAC has changed the user interface for the LSAT starting in August. This is, again, another security change. For the folks who were cheating on the LSAT, they were either capturing unreleased LSAT content. They were essentially screen capturing in some way the unreleased LSAT questions. For those who aren't aware, LSAC has a bank of unreleased questions that they reuse over and over for the online LSAT, which of course poses a security risk, because if somebody can capture those unreleased questions, like with the equivalent of a screen cap, then they can sell those to others, which was happening. And so the new user interface should presumably make it harder for that to happen. And so you want to get familiar with the new user interface starting in August and know that going forward. You can actually simulate all the practice tests with the new interface inside your LSAC Law Hub account. You can access 4 practice tests for free on there right now. The others you can access right now with an official paid Law Hub Advantage subscription. Well worth the investment. For $120, you get a full year of access to all 60 or so LSAT practice tests. Brent says, I got a 176. Congrats, Brent. Awesome. Glad you rocked it. Honored to have been part of your journey. Go out there and apply to law school. Hope you sweep the T14 if that's what you're shooting for. And by the way, folks, we're always looking for new instructors at LSAT Unplugged. And so if you've got a 170 plus, if you've got a top score, if you have teaching experience and you want to help others succeed on it, if you're passionate about the LSAT, feel free to email or DM. Happy to talk through opportunities to teach the LSAT. MKL says, cheating on the LSAT is insane. Do people not care about character and fitness? Yeah, it's a real problem. I guess the question is, if something can be hacked, if something can be cheated on, people will try to exploit the system. And so I think that LSAC has made some good moves here to protect the integrity of the LSAT. Of course, it is a bit of an arms race, and I think there are downsides to what LSAC has done. I don't love the new user interface. I think that it's unfortunately not easy to use, and the fact that you have to click around a lot just to eliminate one answer choice is not ideal. Unfortunately, like I said, they are not going to fix that. So get familiar with the new user interface sooner rather than later so that you know what you're getting into when you take the LSAT for real. Part of why folks' scores will often drop from their practice test to the official is because they are not properly simulating test-to-date conditions. And so if you can get familiar with that interface sooner rather than later, you're not going to have that same kind of drop, hopefully. And that's one reason why I always recommend taking your practice tests on Law Hub directly rather than using some unofficial third-party platform, because the third-party platforms never adequately represent the official thing, and you don't want to have a score drop because you didn't know what it was going to look like. And scanning through for other questions here, folks. Feel free to keep them coming. Star Battlefront says, I want to start studying, but I really struggle with figuring out how or what to start with. And so the first thing you might start with is taking an official LSAT practice test. You can take a free diagnostic on that LSAC Law Hub website. Of course, don't take it as being reflective or indicative of your full potential. All it's going to tell you is that you have not yet learned the language of the LSAT, but of course, you can over time with the proper preparation. We can divide LSAT prep, broadly speaking, into 3 major phases: accuracy, pacing, and endurance. Accuracy is building a strong foundation, learning the lay of the land, the different sections and the different question types, and also drilling LSAT questions by type to better understand the proper perspective from which to view each section and each question type. Then you've got pacing, doing individual timed sections to work on how you allocate your time over the course of the section, when to slow down, when to speed up, when to flag questions, skip them, and come back to them later. And then you have endurance, doing full-length timed practice tests to build up your stamina so that you're not dropping your performance on section 4 just because it is section 4. Then you think about, okay, well, my diagnostic was this score. I want to achieve an increase of 10, 20, 30 points, whatever it might be. So then you say to yourself, okay, well, I want to take the LSAT by August or September or October or November. If you're just starting now, I would want you to allow at least 2 to 3 months at minimum. I feel like August is a bit too soon. I would instead go for September or October at minimum to give yourself more time because, hey, the LSAT's worth it, right? It's the most important factor in the law school admissions process. It weighs more heavily than all of undergrad combined. And so people will obsess over this class or that class, or they'll think to themselves, my GPA is not great. Should I take more summer classes? And I'm like, yeah, you could do all that, or you could just retake the LSAT and get a higher score. It's funny how, your LSAT score is one single day of only 2.5 hours or so, and it weighs more heavily than all 3-4 years of undergrad combined, however long it took you to earn your bachelor's. And so people will say, should I get an internship? Should I work as a paralegal? Should I get a rec letter from this person or that person? And I'm like, yeah, yes to all of that. Everything's valuable to some extent, but with limited time, you got to triage. You got to decide what's most important. And the LSAT being the most important factor is worth optimizing for that before you even think about anything else. So think about where you're at, what your goal score is, how long do you have, how many hours can you put in per day and per week, then craft a study plan to get you from here to there over that time frame. If you want help with that process, that is exactly what we do at LSAT Unplugged. We create personalized study plans for all our students, paired with personal one-on-one coaching programs, live small group classes, on-demand courses. If you want to talk through what your personal coaching program could look like to get you to your goal score on your time frame, you could book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video, pinned in the chat, in my bio as well. For those just joining, I also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet, quick reference PDF download. You can grab it at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. Totally free, no obligation. Linked below, pinned in the chat, in my bio as well. Hurricane's asking, when should I apply to law school and when should I get rec letters? Well, I would ask for rec letters now. That's the one thing I would do earlier on the application side because it's the one thing that requires you to have somebody else do for you. You cannot do it yourself. And so I would request those letters now from your recommenders, and then I'd focus on the LSAT. As for when you should apply to law school, it's when your application is complete, when your rec letters are in, when you've taken the LSAT, when you've completed your personal statement, your optional essays, addenda, your resume, when you've pulled all of that together. So think about how long do you need to hit your goal LSAT score, then work backwards from that and decide your target test date and your application timeline based on that. Also know that after you take the LSAT, you've got a wait of about 2-3 weeks before you get your score back. And so during those 2-3 weeks, you can switch gears, of course, from your LSAT prep to working on applications. So you want to maximize your applications then, in the short term, work more on your LSAT. Garber's asking, is applying in September or October a good time to apply to law school, or is it late? So September and October are not too late. Even November is not too late. You can apply to law school anytime in the fall, and you'll even be early. The cycle has shifted later and later over time, such that applying in October, November is not too late. It's right in the middle. Even January or February is not too late. But speaking now in late June, it's totally fine. And you should be able to knock it out by then. If we were speaking in November, I'd say go for the January or February LSAT, but speaking in late June, even if you're starting now, you could knock out the LSAT by October. Hamza says, just got a 165. My diagnostic was a 152, but I really need the 175. Okay, so in that case, yeah, so you want 10 more points? Yeah, I mean, retake. I actually improved my own LSAT score from a 152 to a 175, so it's certainly possible. Took me an entire year though, and at least half of that was a total waste of time. If I'd done it properly, I could have knocked it out in just a couple of months because the LSAT is a test of pattern recognition. If you can spot the tricks and traps, you can avoid them. It all comes down to understanding how the test makers think and seeing it from their perspective. And so if you want my help getting those next 10 points or beyond, of course, reach out, DM me, email me. You could book the free tutoring lesson. We can talk through it together. Carson says, got a 153. It's my first score. Then Jared says, you could retake and possibly get a few more points for a good scholarship. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a good starting point. Again, right around where I started on my cold diagnostic, but you can improve significantly if you can get 5, 10 points more. You're going to get a lot more scholarship money if that's something that you care about. You'll also get into better law schools. And so, yeah, go for the retake. Take this as learning. Think about how you prepped for before, if at all. Then think about what you can do differently next time around. How can you level up your prep? Did you self-study before with ChatGPT and AI slop books on Amazon, or did you take a course? Did you get coaching? If not, maybe it's time to start thinking about that. And of course, I'm happy to talk you through your options if you'd like. Tex says, anyone tell you that you resemble Jack Antonoff? Yeah, I do get that occasional comment on TikTok, and I see the resemblance as well. Yeah. Zach says, I got a 152, going to retake in August. Should I keep the score or get rid of it? Okay, so we have a lot of people scoring around 152, 153, right around my diagnostic as well. And that's not surprising because that's around the median LSAT score in general for everyone who takes the LSAT. So it's right around the middle there. And so I think it's good of you to consider retaking to do better, of course. As for whether you keep the score or cancel it, the truth is that it doesn't really matter. Score cancellations are an artifact of the days back when law schools averaged multiple LSAT scores, but they no longer do. That's a policy change going back to 2006, 20 years ago now. The ABA changed their policy all the way back then from having law schools report the average LSAT score of a law school student to now only making law schools report the highest score of their entering students. And so for that reason, law schools only take into consideration the highest LSAT score of their students and their applicants. And so for that reason, there is no downside to retaking the LSAT. If you do worse, no big deal. Your previous high score still counts. If you retake and do better, congrats. Now you've got a higher score. And so if you cancel your score, of course, law schools can see that you canceled. They'll assume it probably didn't go very well because if it had gone well, you wouldn't have canceled. So it doesn't really matter what you do. Do whatever you feel better about. Wyatt asks, I got a 160. When should I retake it? I mean, the next opportunity is August. And so ask yourself, you've got 6 weeks between now and the next upcoming LSAT. What's your schedule like during the next 6 weeks? What else do you have going on? Are you working? Are you in school? Do you have family obligations? If you've got the time, go for the retake. If you need more time, go for September. I certainly would retake, though. In general, I think that I'd recommend anyone here considering a retake, go for the retake because it'll get you potentially a higher score and there's no downside. You could retake the LSAT in August in 6 weeks and you'd still be applying to law school at the same time when applications open in September. I literally can't think of any higher yield, bigger benefit way to spend your time if law school admissions is your goal, getting into better law schools, getting more scholarship money than just retaking the LSAT in August. That's what I love about the August LSAT is that, and the June as well, because you take it in June, you've got August as a backup. If you're here, I'm guessing it's because you are considering an LSAT retake or you're planning on a retake or taking it for the first time. But regardless, you take the LSAT in August, it's not even slowing down your application. So just buckle down the next 6 weeks, back burner whatever else you've got going on if you can. You take it early August, get your score back at the end of August. You're still applying when applications open September 1st or September 15th. And I know that it kind of might kill your summer a bit, but it could be as little as doing 5-10 hours a week over the next couple weeks, next 6 weeks or so. Retake prep could be as little as taking one full practice test and reviewing it in depth. Maybe you drill your weak areas on the side. That's all you've got to do. Of course, you can do more and you should do more if you've got the space because it's worth it. Of course, if it can help you get your score, it's worth putting in more like 10, 15, 20 hours a week. But I'm saying it could be as little as 5-10 hours a week, and it's better that than not at all. Skunking asks, Do the reading comp summary strategies really work? I hit a wall in reading comp. So when you say reading comp summary strategies, I'm not sure exactly what you mean. Can you elaborate there, Skunking? I mean, there are a wide variety of different reading comp approaches out there. I'm not familiar with all of them. The strategies that I use for reading comp focus on understanding the structure of the passage to get you away from focusing on the content, the details, the topics, because that's never really what it's about, right? In LSAT reading comp, it's about how the author goes about making their argument. Kind of like how in logical reasoning, you've got the method of reasoning questions. What kind of evidence does the author use to support what kind of conclusion? I have a whole series of videos on the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel talking all about this. I've created explanations for hundreds of official LSAT reading comp passages. There's a whole playlist of those on the YouTube channel, linked in my bio, by the way, where I walk through the structure of the passage. So take a look at that if you want more. But I wouldn't want you summarizing, because to me that sounds like focusing on content, which we don't want to do. So check out the YouTube channel for more. And of course, we could talk through this during the free tutoring lesson if you'd like. Marie's asking, how much are the tutoring lessons? So we personalize every program to the individual student. It's not a one size fits all. It's a comprehensive custom program to get you from your starting score up to your goal score by your target test date. And so everyone's got a different starting point, different goal, different time frame. And so there's no one size fits all for this sort of thing. If you want to talk through what your study plan could look like, you can, of course, book the free tutoring lesson with me, linked in my bio, and we could talk through your particulars. Miss asks, I scored less than the diagnostic and ran out of time. My score was horrible, so I canceled it. Well, I'm sorry to hear about that. That's unfortunate, of course, but good news is, I mean, you can still retake. The retake limits are pretty liberal. You can take the LSAT 5 times in 5 years, 7 times for life, and if you get a 180, you can't take it again. And so, assuming that you haven't taken it 4 times already, you've still got retake opportunities available to you. And so the question becomes here, why did you score less than your diagnostic? Why did you run out of time? What can you change about your prep going forward to avoid the same thing happening again? Sounds like a nightmare scenario. I'm really sorry to hear about that, but that's what I'm here to help you out with. So if you want to book the free tutoring with me, we could talk through your situation more. Evan says, I got a score hold, but I think I got a 180. I quite literally can't register for future LSATs, which basically confirms it. Well, I'm sorry to hear about the score hold. I hope that you did get a 180. If you scored way higher than a previous LSAT take, or you had something else that doesn't line up with their expectations, like your Law Hub data doesn't reflect a similarly high practice test score, that could be part of why there was a score hold. I hope they release the score hold soon and you did get a 180, but I would think through that sort of thing to see what it might have happened, and of course, follow up with LSAC repeatedly so that they release your score sooner, but fingers crossed for you, Evan. Scanning through for more questions here. Cherry asks, what's the latest retake I can take and still apply to law school this cycle? So that depends on the law school's deadlines. Each law school has its own unique deadline. Some law schools will take the results of the February LSAT, some will not. Some will take April LSAT results, some will not. But speaking now in June, assuming that you're applying this coming fall for the upcoming cycle, you've got many, many LSATs available to you. As for the cycle finishing up now, I don't know if any law schools would take August LSAT results to start law school that month, because you're already bumping up against the beginning of the new entering a 1L year. So probably not, unfortunately. And in general, I mean, when you apply at the tail end of the cycle, there's less scholarship money available. It's also way harder to get in. So for better outcomes, I'd say just wait a cycle. In other words, take the August LSAT or September LSAT and apply at the beginning of the new cycle when there are more seats available and it's also easier to get in. Skunk asks, does age play any factor in applying? Well, I'll say this. I mean, when you are a KJD, someone who's going directly from undergrad into law school, then you're typically going to be a younger applicant in most cases, assuming that you don't have a ton of work experience. And in those cases, they're going to focus more on your undergraduate GPA because that's what they have to look at. They don't have data or a long resume of work experience to look at. And so they focus more on what they do have, which is the undergraduate GPA. If it's been a while since you were an undergrad, if you're an older applicant, if you have more work experience, then of course, they've got that to look at as well. And so they will look at it. Now, the longer you've been out of undergrad, the less your undergraduate GPA matters, and the more your LSAT score matters, and the more your work experience matters. Because when you have been out of undergrad for a longer time, your undergraduate GPA was earned years ago, maybe even decades ago, and so who you were back then is not who you are today. You've grown, you've changed, you've presumably matured, and so they'll focus more on the LSAT, which is a more recent metric for them, and everyone's LSAT score is taken within the last 5 years. After that point, it expires. And so they'll focus more on your LSAT score. They'll also look more at your work experience, and so keep that in mind. But age specifically is not a barrier, no. And law schools love older applicants. They love the work experience, and so make sure to highlight that in your application and in your essays and your resume and such. Just looking for more questions here, folks. Feel free to keep them coming in. Carson says, I mostly just took practice tests. What should I do next? Well, the question would be, how did you review those practice tests? How did you review your mistakes? Were you getting personal feedback from anybody on what you were getting wrong and why you were getting it wrong? Because the thing is that if you don't learn from your mistakes, you may just end up making the same mistake again. And that's what we want to help you avoid that, right? So doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, I mean, that's the definition of insanity, right? We got to look at, you're taking practice tests. What does your review process look like? Are you just looking at the answer key and saying to yourself, oh, I get it now. How could I have been so dumb? Then doing the same thing all over again? Or are you keeping a mistake log, an error journal of some kind, documenting the key takeaways or insights from your review so that you can avoid making the same mistake again? That's what I would look for you to change next time around. And of course, if you do end up identifying particular weak areas, gaps in your fundamentals, misconceptions regarding particular question types or methods of reasoning, then that would indicate and point towards your needing to focus on those areas to shore up your foundation. For example, a lot of students I find come to us having taken another program, not going to name names, of course, but some of the bigger options. They'll say, for example, that they don't understand the difference between necessary assumption questions and sufficient assumption questions. And those are asking for very different things. A necessary assumption question is a very specific kind of must-be-true question, asking you what needs to be the case in order for the argument to work. Meaning, if that thing were not the case, the conclusion would fall apart given the evidence and the argument no longer works. In contrast, sufficient assumption questions are asking for new information that, if true, guarantees the argument 100%, leaving no ambiguity at all. Some prep companies lump these two question types together under the catch-all category of assumption, but in reality, there's necessary assumption and sufficient assumption. And so when you correct a misconception like that, you then see a pretty quick score boost because the student was previously getting both of those types wrong consistently, mixing them up. Now they're getting both types right. And necessary assumption is one of the most common types of logical reasoning questions, along with inference and flaw. So the three most common question types then are necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. And there are 15 different types of logical reasoning questions, but some are less common than those. And so when we're looking at what's the lowest hanging fruit, what's the highest yield question type that gives you the biggest return on your investment, it's going to be focusing on those three types to start: necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. We always want to start you off looking at those before focusing on less common types like parallel reasoning and evaluate the argument, which I know everybody hates, but there just aren't that many parallel questions compared to necessary assumption. And so why would we look at a less common type if we haven't mastered the more common types yet? Alexa says, got a 160, watched your video study, so thank you. Awesome, Alexa. Glad you got a 160. Congrats on that. Whit is asking, What's your best advice to improve on the reading comp section of the LSAT? So I talked earlier about the structure. One other thing I'll talk about, though, is the general approach and the time allocation. I find that far too many students spend way too long on reading comp, highlighting, underlining, note taking. It takes time to write things down. It takes time to read things. And what you write down ends up even not being that useful to help you solve the questions. And so I find the students who do the best on reading comp tend to mark very little or possibly not even at all, believe it or not. The highlighting and underlining tools on the LSAT additionally are a bit glitchy and imprecise. I would practice with those multiple times using the Law Hub platform before assuming it's going to work well on test day. Some of these third-party unofficial LSAT platforms don't adequately represent the software, including the glitches that the official LSAT has, and so you don't want to be in for a surprise or a rude awakening on test day when you find that a tool you've been relying on actually doesn't work that well. So move away from the highlighting, move away from the underlining. If you're going to take any notes, keep them very, very minimal. Then in reading comp, you don't need to solve the questions in the order they are given to you. In fact, I recommend doing them in a different order. I would do the global, general, big picture questions first, like main idea, primary purpose, passage organization, title, tone, author's opinion. I would knock all of those out first before working on the detail questions that require going back to the passage. And then I would save the more inferential questions for last, the ones that require a bit more reading between the lines. So global first, big picture, then local, meaning detail, second, and finally inferential, like what would the author be most likely to agree with, I would save those for last. In terms of time allocation, I would tend to spend roughly 3 minutes on the initial read of the passage, then save the remaining time for the questions. If you spend 5 minutes on the passage read, you're going to have like 30 seconds to solve each of the questions. That's not really enough time. Bub was asking, how should you deal with the fatigue of reading 4 straight reading comp passages? Well, I would handle it the same way you handle doing 4 LSAT sections in one sitting. You practice to build up your endurance, just like a long distance runner does many training runs to build up their cardio, build up their endurance over time. You can build up endurance really fast if you're consistent. If you did a practice test twice a week for 3 months, you'd build up your endurance for sure. I mean, that would end up being what, like 24 or so practice tests, 26 practice tests. That's a lot. But by practice test 26, your endurance will be way stronger than it was at the beginning, right? So you do it to get, the best way to do it is just to do it and get better at it over time by practicing. Getting your rhythm, building your endurance is a function of just putting in the work. It seems hard because you probably just haven't done it enough. But it will get easier as you do it more. And like I said, if you do 5 sections in a sitting, 4 seems easier by comparison. Doing 5 passages in a sitting makes 4 seem easier by comparison. Not saying to do it every single time, but do it here and there. Emma says, I was practice testing in the 175 plus range for 5 or more tests. I got a 167 and I'm sobbing. Really sorry to hear it, Emma. That's really rough. It's unfortunate. No, that's not what you were expecting. So take a couple days off if you need it. You deserve it. The fact that you scored so well going in tells us that you're capable of doing that well. But we've got to look at what was the disconnect between your practice and the actual. And so if you want to talk through that, you can book a free tutoring lesson with me and we can talk through the particulars. I spoke a bit earlier about some of the reasons why students' scores tend to drop. And so you can review the replay of this live if you'd like. By the way, folks, I do these lives every single weekday on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and the recordings of all of them are on the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel under the live tab. And so if you're joining midway through, if you're joining late and you want to catch the entire live where I talked through score drops and why they happen, you can go to the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and you'll see the recording there. It's all archived there, as well as all the other previous lives. And I typically do these lives every weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. but I'm doing today's early in the morning for the June LSAT score release, of course. Ariana says, I got a 141 and have a 3.8 GPA. Struggle with reading comp. Okay, so your 3.8 GPA is impressive, so kudos on that. The 141 doesn't reflect your potential, I think, given how good your GPA is. And so we want to work to get your LSAT score up. If we can get your score up 20 points with that 3.8 GPA, you're going to have way better admissions outcomes. And of course, if we can get up even more, you'll get even better admissions outcomes. And so it's worth putting in the time. I saw that you mentioned you're struggling with reading comprehension. So try implementing some of what I've talked about here. See if that can get your score up. And of course, I'm happy to meet with you personally and talk through how to get your score up as well. And by the way, folks, for those just joining, I've put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. It's a quick reference on everything logical reasoning and reading comp. It's a quick reference PDF download that you can grab at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. The link is below the video, pinned in the chat, in my bio as well. Smiley says, I feel like now that I know the testing environment and such, I'll feel better going in a second time. Hey, I mean, that's a silver lining, right? If you took the LSAT, didn't go your way, and you want to retake it, at least having been through a full sitting tells you what it's like. You know what the experience is going to be like, especially if you took it in person, which is going to be going forward, of course. You know the testing center, the proctoring situation. You, of course, know the software, the stress of taking it for real. And so that can hopefully reduce any of the stress or anxiety around taking it officially. I recommend that everyone actually register for a later LSAT when they take their official one, just for peace of mind, knowing that it's not all riding on that one LSAT. Because while the LSAT as a whole is incredibly important, no one particular LSAT test date will make or break you because you can always retake. Law schools don't average multiple scores. They only take into consideration the highest LSAT score on your record. And so if you took it, it didn't go your way, you can pick up the pieces. You can cancel the score or not, doesn't even matter. Only your highest LSAT score will count. And that's due to that American Bar Association policy change going back 20 years now, but old myths die hard, I guess. But only your highest LSAT score matters for admissions purposes. And so if you retake it in August or September and do better, or beyond, of course, the high score is what counts. Cam says, I have a 3.93 GPA, just got a 165 LSAT. Could that work for Boston College? Then Fredeha points out, what about the medians, right? So that's exactly right. The medians determine whether your numbers are good or bad. There's no such thing as good or bad in the abstract. It's only relative to serving your goals in terms of the law schools that you want to go to. And admissions is incredibly metrics driven. The numbers determine your chances. And so you want to look at where does your LSAT score stack up against your target school's LSAT median? Where does your GPA stack up against their GPA median? If you are at or above the medians, your numbers are good. If they're below the medians, your numbers are, for lack of a better word, bad. I don't say bad in no judgmental way, just bad in that they don't serve your interests or your goals, right? Law schools are incentivized to care about your numbers because they care about the US News rankings. Law schools' reputations live and die based on their place in the rankings and whether they go up or down. If they go up, they are considered more prestigious, and then they can more easily attract future applicants, and they can also attract more donations from alumni. If they fall in the rankings, their prestige suffers. It's harder for them to attract more applicants, and if it's hard to attract more applicants, then they've got to give applicants more scholarship money to attract the applicant to choose their school. And so literally, everything for them is riding on their place in the rankings, which means that if you can apply to a law school with strong numbers, the law school has more reason to want to choose you over another applicant, and they will incentivize you to choose their school by giving you scholarship money because you will help them raise their status in the rankings. And so for any given school, look at where are your numbers relative to the rankings, to the medians. If your numbers are strong, you've got a good shot. If your numbers are weak, your shot is not as good. And for Cam here with a 3.93 GPA, that's a really strong GPA. That's T14 material GPA. The 165, though, is below median for the T14. I don't know Boston College's LSAT median off the top of my head, but you can easily Google that. And so the question becomes, if it's below Boston College's median, then Cam might want to retake. James is asking, if I did a paralegal program post-grad and graduated with honors, should that be something I include in strengthening my application? Definitely include it, yes. Any program of that nature, anything academic or work experience should be on your resume by default. However, I wouldn't assume that doing anything paralegal related will necessarily give you a major boost in your chances. In part because it's not that unique. Being a paralegal is probably the most common work experience to have going into law school, so it's not going to stand out necessarily. Of course, it's nice to have, not saying it's not. And law schools always like to see that you have legal related experience of some kind. They want to know that you're not going to law school because you watch Suits and like it and you want to be the next Harvey Specter, right? They want to see that you know what law is actually like as it is practiced in the real world. And so if you've worked as a paralegal, if you've got an education as a paralegal, that's going to help certainly, but I would want you to focus more on getting a higher LSAT score regardless. Good question though, but certainly include it in your application essays and your resume. Get rec letters related to it if you can. Just scanning through for more questions, folks. Here, feel free to keep them coming. And by the way, folks, if you're finding this live helpful, please do me a favor and spread the word. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them. So I do appreciate your support, sharing this to your socials on TikTok, for example, sharing it in Facebook groups, Discords, subreddits, any pre-law societies that you're part of. The more this grows, the more I'll expand it over time. And so I do appreciate the word of mouth. VCAM's asking, what's more worth it, CPA or bar? Can you elaborate? Not sure what you mean about that in terms of work experience background. Yeah, I can speak to law school specifically. Are you saying that if you worked as a CPA and you want to go into law, for example? I mean, that will be unique and that will stand out. Not sure how bar relates though, but please elaborate if you can. Jay's asking, if my score is not where I want it to be, should I not report it to schools? I mean, if your score is not what you wanted, you can cancel it or you can keep it. Any score on your record will by default get reported to law schools though. Law schools can see all scores on your record. And so if there's a score that you don't like and you'd rather hide it, you can, of course, cancel the score. Law schools will see the cancellation though, and they'll assume that if you cancel the score, probably didn't go very well, because if it had gone well, you wouldn't have canceled, right? So ultimately, it doesn't matter that much whether you cancel or not. I would make a decision, then just move forward and say to myself, okay, well, what can I do differently going forward to get a higher score in the future so I won't need to cancel and I'll get a score that I'm proud of? So think about your prep up to this point. How did you study? What support did you get? What methods did you use? Can you level up support? Is there a resource, a course, coaching that you didn't take before that you could take now that you think could get your score up next time? You've got plenty of LSAT retake opportunities going forward. You've got August in 6 weeks, September in 2.5 months. Even the October and November LSATs are not too late. And if you want to talk through your options, you can, of course, book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me personally. Happy to talk you through the options. You can book the free tutoring with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. Links below the video, pinned in the chat, in my bio as well. I see Dot's asking, can a 170 LSAT and a 4.0 GPA get into NYU Law? Possibly. Those are certainly strong numbers. A 4.0 GPA is a little bit above the NYU Law median. It's a bit below on the LSAT median, though I think their median LSAT's a 173. And so if you're below on the LSAT, you want to be above on the GPA, which you are in that case. And so you've got a shot. Of course, if you can get your LSAT up even just a couple points, that'll make a big difference though. So that's where I would devote your efforts if you haven't already. You're saying their median's a 168, 169? That's not true. Maybe that's their 25th percentile, but median and 25th are two different things. So I would double check that. I would double check that. That's not the data that I have. So when law schools report their LSAT stats, you're confirming it's the 25th percentile. Yeah. So when law schools report their LSAT stats, there's the 25th percentile, the 50th, and the 75th. 50th is the median. That means half got below that number, half got above that number. 25th means a quarter got below that number. 70th means 3/4 got above that number. 3/4 got below that number. And so you want to keep that in mind when you're looking at the spread. Make sure you're always looking at the median. That's the cleanest indication of the number that you want to beat, just to keep things simple. Thanks for joining us today, folks. I'll be back tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. I'll see you all then. In the meantime, all the best. Take care. Thanks for joining.